We talked about the Fringe Festival earlier this year, and among the hits that emerged from it were an original play about Peter Pan and Mark Twain, one about men's body parts, and another about a soldier and his dog.
That last one, Bond, was restaged this fall at the Fish Tank. Producer Ashley Holcroft got to spend some offstage time with actor-playwright Logan Black and Diego.
Diego! The same dream again.
Based on his 2006 tour of duty in Iraq, Bond chronicles the relationship between Logan Black and his bomb-detecting partner Diego. It all started in 1996, when fresh out of high school, Logan joined the Utah National Guard. In 2004, in deference to 9/11, Logan suspended his undergrad studies and went active duty with the Army. But there was just one problem.
The job I had there wasn't available in the military, so they said, we're going to reclassify you and make you a combat engineer. So primarily dealing with landmines and explosives and that sort of thing. It's a terrifying job. I found out about a new dog program that the DoD was doing in conjunction with the British Army. So I called the enlisted personnel branch of the Pentagon and say, there's a dog school, right, for engineers? And they said, yeah. And I said, I want to volunteer. And 2 weeks later, I came down on orders.
I first met Diego in 2005 as part of the Specialized Search Dog Course in Fort Leonard Wood, a few hours south of here. These guys had over 40 years of explosive detection work, and they were geniuses. Right, lads. Welcome to the Specialized Search Dog Course. Over the next 14 weeks, you and your sons will learn to detect over 40 individual explosive odors. IEDs, improvised explosive devices, have become the most lethal weapon insurgents are using against coalition forces, and they're damn good at it.
As destiny would have it, out of the 24 possible dogs, Logan was paired with that keen yellow lab.
We clicked instantly, and he was smart. So smart. He would cheat. About halfway through, Diego started finding devices faster than any other dog. And I don't mean running a 40-minute problem in 20 minutes. I mean, he would almost run right to the bomb. After a few days of this, Ron realized that Diego was tracking his scent to where he was placing the bomb. We had to start changing up who set our problems so that Diego would just search. Oh, he was the perfect mixture of play drive, curiosity, and intelligence. And his nose.
Logan and Diego were partners for over a year, making incredible finds. Together, they discovered caches of over 250,000 pounds of weapons, explosives, IEDs, and ammunition. Because of the specialized task they performed, the pair weren't part of a specific unit, instead being assigned to missions with everyone from the SEALs to the Iraqi police. But this constant shifting bore with it a deep sense of isolation.
It was just me and Diego. I'd do a mission, we'd come home, I'd go back to my trailer, get ready for the next mission. I was left on my own to process all the emotions that were happening.
No! Diego! This way! Come! Come here! No. You're okay. Moving on to conduct a rapid search. Every fiber in my body is telling me that this is a car bomb. Come on, buddy. What's this?
So I know without him, had I been alone in those situations, or had I even been with a dog that we didn't have a personal connection on top of the professional working connection, I don't know how I would have come out of it. He absolutely kept me healthy.
When their time together came to a close, Diego was transferred to another handler, and Logan came to Kansas City to pursue an MFA in acting and directing at UMKC, all the while trying in vain to monitor his partner's retirement eligibility. They would be apart for 7 long years before being reunited in 2012 after Logan mounted a social media campaign to find his beloved boy.
It's been fantastic. I picked him up 3 years ago now and brought him back home. He still wants to work. All of his training is still second nature. When he goes into a new space, he always does a left to right cursory check of the room, looks at everything, smells everything, then says, "Okay, Dad, it's good. Now I'm just gonna lay down and somebody better come pet me." So he's living a pretty wonderful life of retirement.
But we may have never heard about their adventures if this past March, while performing in the Heart of America Shakespeare Festival's Merchant of Venice, Logan hadn't posed a question to fellow actor Robert Gibby Brand.
I said, "Hey, what one-man shows would be good for Fringe that are 60 minutes? And he said, "Oh, that's easy, yours." And so that kind of planted the seed. It took me probably about 3 months to do the initial script and then a month to do the rewrites. And it was very much a double-edged sword. I spent a lot of time doing research, and sometimes that would trigger my PTSD. And I would find that I had just gone down that rabbit hole. Other times it was very cathartic to look at a traumatic event. Now that I have perspective and distance from it, and break it down and go, why did I act the way I did? I worked very hard to never take a stance whether the war was good, whether it was right, whether we were lied to or were we not. That's not what the story's about. It's just about my interaction with a dog.
And it's an interaction that has deeply resonated with audiences, a fact that surprised Logan on his first playwriting effort.
It's the type of theater I think all artists want to do. We want to affect a change in our audience's minds. And suddenly I was seeing that happen right in front of me.
And then I saw it. Diego, come! Come here, buddy! Whoa!
The show ends, everyone claps, and Diego is swarmed with people to pet him, and I'm swarmed with people that are shaking my hand and hugging me and crying. I had one veteran pull me to the side. He fought in Vietnam, and he told me that if somebody from his generation had been able to tell their story in this way, he wouldn't have spent 30 years wandering in darkness. So when I have a vet tell me something like that, I have to continue telling this story. I think vets telling their stories would be a game changer. So I hope the show inspires, if it inspires one vet to write a poem, then all my productions have succeeded.
Good boy.